In the heart of Eziama, a village cradled by rolling hills and whispering forests, Adaise sat by the small clay hut she called home. The golden sun stretched lazily across the sky, but she did not see it. She never had. From the moment of her birth, Adaise had known only darkness. The villagers spoke in hushed voices when she passed, murmuring words of pity and fear. The cursed one, they called her, the God's punishment upon us. Mothers pulled their children away from her, and the elders would shake their heads, whispering prayers to ward off any misfortune her presence might bring. Her mother, Nika, was the only one who loved her fiercely, shielding her from the cruel whispers of the world. Adaise, my child, Neka would say, brushing her daughter's thick hair with gentle hands. You are not cursed. The gods have simply given you a different way of seeing. But Adaise could feel the fear that clung to the village like a shadow. It was in the way they avoided her, the way silence fell whenever she entered the marketplace, the way people made the sign of protection when she passed. Yet Adaise was no ordinary girl, though her eyes saw nothing. Her mind was filled with visions, glimpses of things yet to come, whispered secrets carried by the wind. She had once dreamed of a great storm days before it struck the village, flooding their farmlands and drowning their livestock. When she warned them, they ignored her, and when the storm came, they blamed her. She brought this upon us, they said. The blind girl speaks of things no one should know. Despite their rejection, Adaise carried on. She listened to the rustling of the wind, felt the whispers in the earth beneath her feet, and sensed the unseen forces that moved through the village. Deep down, she knew her gift was not a curse. It was a calling. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Adaise sat alone outside her hut. The air was thick with the scent of rain, though no clouds darkened the sky. She closed her eyes and let the words speak to her. And then it came, like a flash of lightning in the darkness of her mind. She saw him. Prince Ifani, the heir to the kingdom of Omuachi, stood in the forbidden forest, his golden robe torn, his face smeared with sweat and blood. Behind him, a dark figure lurked, something monstrous, something hungry. Adaise could feel the prince's heartbeat quicken, the cold breath of death trailing him. She gasped, clutching her chest. The vision faded, leaving her breathless and trembling. She knew what she had seen was no mere dream. It was a warning. Adaise! Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. What is it, child? What have you seen? Tears welled in Adaise's unseeing eyes. The prince, she whispered. He is in danger. Something terrible awaits him in the forest. Neka's face paled. You must tell someone. The elders, the chief. Someone must listen. But they wouldn't. Adaise knew they wouldn't. Who would believe the word of a blind girl they called cursed? I have to try, Adaise said, determination settling in her heart. With her mother guiding her steps, they made their way through the village, past curious eyes and murmuring tongues. They reached the chief's compound, where a gathering of elders sat discussing the upcoming royal hunt. Adaise stepped forward. I have seen something, she said, her voice trembling but steady. The prince is in danger. He must not enter the forbidden forest. The elders exchanged glances, their faces etched with skepticism and disdain. Chief Ekena, his voice deep and weary, sighed. Adaise, child, your words bring only fear and confusion. You speak of things you cannot know. But I do know, she insisted, gripping her mother's arm. Please, if you don't believe me, he will die. The chief's expression softened for a moment before hardening again. Enough. We do not take warnings from one touched by darkness. Humiliation burned Adaise's skin, but she held her head high. She had done what she could. As she turned away, a figure lingered in the shadows, watching her with quiet curiosity. It was Prince Ifeanyi himself, having overheard her desperate plea. He watched the blind girl, wondering if there was more to her words than mere superstition. The next morning, the village was abuzz with excitement. The royal hunting party prepared to venture into the forbidden forest, their spears sharpened, their spirits high. The prince, ignoring the girl's warning, led the group with confidence, his horse prancing beneath him. From the edge of the village, Ade stood, her sightless eyes gazing toward the forest. Fear gnawed at her heart. The vision had been too real, too vivid to be ignored. As the hunting party disappeared into the thick foliage, Ades felt a sudden chill wash over her. The vision was happening, she knew it. She turned to her mother. "I have to follow them," Nika gasped. "You cannot, Ades. The forest, it's too dangerous." "I must," Ades said firmly. "I may be blind, but I can see more than they know." With her mother's reluctant blessing and the old sage Okoro's guidance, Ades stepped into the forbidden forest, the whispers of the wind guiding her steps. Deep within the woods, the prince's party rode on, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. The forest was alive with sounds, chittering insects, the rustling of leaves, the distant cry of a hunting hawk. Then it happened. A beast, massive and black as night, erupted from the undergrowth, its glowing red eyes fixed on the prince, its fangs bared in a menacing snarl. Chaos erupted as the hunters scrambled, their spears useless against the creature's thick hide. Prince Ifeanyi's horse reared, throwing him to the ground. He scrambled to his feet, panic in his eyes. And then a voice he did not expect. "Move to your left." Adesi's voice rang through the chaos. Stunned, the prince obeyed just in time, narrowly avoiding the beast's claws. Ades, with her unseen sight, guided him through the chaos, helping him evade the deadly strikes. In that moment, the prince realized the truth. The blind girl had seen what no one else could. The forest pulsed with an eerie stillness after the attack, the air thick with the scent of sweat and fear. Prince Ifeanyi leaned against a tree, his chest heaving, staring at Ades in disbelief. The other hunters, battered and shaken, whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between the girl and the place where the beast had vanished into the shadows. You saw it," the prince said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ades turned her sightless eyes toward him, her face calm despite the tremor in her hands. "Not with my eyes, your highness. I see through the whispers of the wind, through the heartbeats of the earth." The hunters muttered prayers under their breath, unsure whether to see her as a savior or something otherworldly. But Prince Ifeanyi's gaze lingered on her, realization dawning. She had saved his life, and without her, they would have all perished. "We must return to the village," the prince announced, his voice steady now. "She is coming with us." "But your highness," one of his men objected, "this girl, she is blind. She should not have even been here." The prince silenced him with a sharp look. "And yet she saw what we could not. We owe her our lives." Reluctantly, the hunting party began their trek back to Isiama, with the Daisy walking carefully beside them, her head held high. The murmurs of the hunters filled the journey, but she ignored them. Her mind was racing. What was that creature? And why had the vision come to her? When they reached the village, the news of Adesi's involvement spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered, their eyes wide with shock and skepticism. The chief and elders stood at the forefront, their expressions unreadable as Prince Ifeanyi recounted the events. "She saved me," he said firmly. "Without her, I would not be standing here before you." A heavy silence fell over the crowd before Chief Ekena spoke. "This child, the one we have feared for so long, has saved our future king." His eyes narrowed as he studied Adé's, searching for answers in her face. The whispers of the crowd grew louder. Some saw her as a hero, others as an omen of darker things to come. She has a gift, Prince Ifeni continued, one that should not be ignored. The elders exchanged glances, torn between tradition and the undeniable truth. Finally, the Dibia, the village's spiritual healer, stepped forward. His eyes, wise and searching, settled on Adé's. I have long said that the gods do not make mistakes, he said slowly. Perhaps this girl was given to us for a reason. Adé's mother, Neka, stepped forward, tears of relief in her eyes. My daughter is not a curse, she said proudly. She is a blessing. But not all were convinced. Some still eyed her warily, whispering of witchcraft and curses. She is a danger, an old woman hissed. What if her visions bring more harm than good? Days passed, and Adé's found herself summoned to the palace more often. Prince Ifani sought her counsel, curious about her visions and the way she perceived the world. How do you see things? He asked one afternoon, sitting with her under the shade of a baobab tree. Adé smiled faintly, running her fingers along the rough bark. I listen, she said simply. The earth speaks in ways most do not understand. The whispers in the wind, the rhythm of footsteps, the way people breathe. They tell me everything I need to know. The prince studied her in silence, admiration growing in his heart. He had always thought strength lay in physical prowess, but here was a girl who, despite her blindness, saw deeper than anyone he had ever known. Over time, their friendship blossomed. Adé's, for the first time in her life, felt truly seen. And Ifeni, despite his royal upbringing, found comfort in her quiet wisdom. But trouble was brewing. One night, as Adé slept, another vision came to her, darker, more urgent. She saw the same monstrous creature from the forest, but this time it was not lurking in the shadows. It was coming for the village. Adé woke with a start, her heart pounding. She had to warn the prince. Throwing on a shawl, she hurried through the sleeping village, knocking urgently on the palace doors. The guards hesitated at first, but let her through when they saw the intensity in her face. Prince Ifeni was already awake, troubled by his own thoughts. What is it? He asked, concerned. The beast, Adé whispered. It's coming, soon. Without hesitation, the prince gathered his warriors. Despite the lingering doubt among his men, Ifeni trusted Adé's words. As the village prepared for the unknown threat, Adé found herself standing side by side with the prince, her heart steady despite the fear swirling around them. You were meant to be here, Ifeni told her softly, and for the first time in her life she believed it too. The air in Eziama grew tense as the village prepared for the coming threat. Warriors sharpened their spears, women and children were ushered into their huts, and fires were lit along the village perimeter. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, mirroring the unease that clung to the people like a shroud. Prince Ifeni stood beside Adé, watching the flickering flames. Are you sure it will come tonight? He asked, his voice low but steady. Adé closed her eyes, listening to the wind, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. A shiver ran down her spine. It's close, she whispered. It watches us even now. The prince tightened his grip on his spear. Then we will be ready. As the night deepened, an unnatural silence fell over the village. The usual chirping of crickets and distant howls of wolves were absent. The only sound was the crackling of the fires. Then it came. A guttural growl echoed through the trees, low and menacing. Shadows shifted at the edge of the village, and then from the darkness, the beast emerged. It was larger than Adé had envisioned, black fur glistening under the moonlight, eyes burning red with a hunger that sent chills down the spines of even the bravest warriors. The villagers gasped in terror, some whispering prayers to the gods. The beast let out a deafening roar, shaking the very ground beneath them. "Hold your ground," Ifeanyi commanded, raising his spear. The creature lunged forward, but Adaeze, sensing its movements before it acted, cried out, "To the left!" Ifeanyi instinctively followed her command, narrowly avoiding the swipe of the beast's massive claws. The warriors attacked, but their spears barely pierced its thick hide. It moved with unnatural speed, swiping away their weapons and knocking men to the ground with ease. Adaeze pressed her hands to the earth, feeling the energy coursing through it. "The fire!" she shouted. "Lure it to the fire." Prince Ifeanyi didn't hesitate. "Warriors, drive it to the flames." The men reformed, thrusting their spears and shields in unison, pushing the creature back toward the roaring bonfires. The beast recoiled, snarling in fury, its dark form flickering in the fire's glow. But it wasn't enough. Just as it seemed the fire might drive it away, the beast turned suddenly, locking its gaze onto Ifeanyi. It pounced with terrifying speed. Adaeze screamed, running forward without thinking. No, in that moment time seemed to slow. Just as the beast's claws reached for the prince, Adaeze threw herself between them. She felt the rush of air, the heat of the creature's breath, and then nothing. The beast stopped. A strange hush fell over the village as the monster tilted its head, as if recognizing something in the blind girl. It sniffed the air around her, eyes flickering with something other than hunger. Adaeze stood still, trembling but unyielding. Her voice, barely above a whisper, reached the beast. "You are not just a creature of darkness. I see you." For a moment the world held its breath. Then, with a deep, rumbling growl, the beast stepped back, retreating into the shadows from which it had come. The villagers stared in stunned silence as the monster disappeared into the forest, leaving behind only the echo of its haunting roar. As the first light of dawn touched Eziama, the villagers emerged from their huts, hesitant and awed. The beast was gone, and Adaeze stood at the center of it all, her head bowed, her body trembling with exhaustion. Prince Ifeanyi approached her carefully, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. "You saved us," he said softly. Adaeze shook her head. "I only helped you see what was always there. The beast was not meant to destroy us, only to test us." Chief Ekena, the village elders, and the people who once shunned her now looked at her with a new respect. Even those who had doubted her stood in silence, humbled by the truth they could no longer deny. Dibia Okoro stepped forward, his voice reverent. "Adaeze is not a curse. She is a gift from the gods. We were blind, not her." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and one by one they stepped forward, offering their gratitude. For the first time in her life, Adaeze felt truly seen. In the days that followed, Adaeze found herself called to the palace often, not just for counsel, but as a friend to Prince Ifeanyi. Their bond deepened with each passing day, built on trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they walked by the river, Ifeanyi turned to her, his voice thoughtful. "I once thought strength meant power, but now I see that it is something else entirely." He paused before adding, "I see you, Adaeze, not as the girl they feared, but as the woman who saved my life." Adaeze's heart pounded, unsure of what to say. "I am just a girl," she whispered, "a girl who listens." Ifeanyi smiled. "And that is more than enough." As the sun set over the village, the prince took her hand gently. "I wish to make you my wife." Adaeze's breath caught in her throat. "But I am not a princess. I am not what they expect." You are more than what they expect, Ifeanyi said firmly. You are who I choose. Tears welled in Adaeze's unseeing eyes, but she smiled, feeling the warmth of the future that awaited her. The wedding of Prince Ifeanyi and Adaeze was a grand affair, attended by nobles from neighboring kingdoms and villagers who once whispered about her curse. Dressed in fine garments, Adaeze stood proudly by Ifeanyi's side, no longer the blind girl they pitied, but the seer they honored. Under her guidance, the kingdom thrived. People sought her wisdom, and she taught them to listen to the earth, the wind, and the silent whispers that carried secrets. And so, the girl they once called a curse became their greatest blessing. This story reminds us that sometimes our greatest strengths are hidden within what others perceive as weaknesses. Thank you for watching, and remember, never underestimate the power of believing in yourself. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this.